And yeah, so I mean, I know I said that stuff about like doing this, like how we can integrate, but I don't know. I think there must be something, even something very basic that just like holds common like UI, common style even.
Yeah. Oh, dude, totally. I mean, I think for teams 1, 2, and 3, we're totally relying on each team.
Yeah.
And so we will be. I mean, it's best if we all kind of coalesce to the same things. What I'm a little fearful of is, like, I want to maximize the opportunities for like joint success, but minimize the opportunities of like systemic fail. If one team, can't complete their piece and the other team's relying on it, so it's kind of like one of these things where it's like, oh yeah, whatever somebody makes in at least for the 3 teams, that's a success. We put it on the presentation, like, oh, look at it, we are using team 1, we're using team 2 and team 3, and like team 3 should be really easy because we have a live DApp deployed. Like this is real software that we can play with that has lots of like opportunities to be visual on the give us side of things. But like team 1, if the UI doesn't work out, the math doesn't work out, they can't get a clickable thing, maybe it's just a screenshot, right? Okay, so we use this token bonding curve. And team 2, same thing. Team 2 has big question marks on whether or not they'll be able to pull off a full UI for a working DAO. Okay, yeah. That's a lot. So trying to make like a real working prototype, I think, is out of the question. But like making sure, like trying to standardize design, there's been a fair amount of effort on that, and I hope team 1 follows suit and kind of goes with like what we're.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is like we just shouldn't be like trying to repeat like the same things, like the same elements, if we can avoid it. I don't know. So I mean, maybe I'll just look into this separately and see if anyone else is interested. But I would be interested to look into like if we could, because we can start now a little bit, right?
Yeah. Oh, dude, the hackathon you could have started 10 years
ago.
I
mean, I'd just be interested to look and to see if we could have this thing where we have like a common library, like a React project that's like common, and then other teams can pull it in. So like, and then you could. I think that's possible. And then obviously people can do their own work in their own project, but then at a certain point you go, oh, actually this is common. Let's move that across to this common thing, and everybody can just pull the next version.
Yeah, I mean, we have.
I don't know. I'll try just explore it on my own, because if I could get that set up, I'm already working.
Yeah, I mean, we forked a branch on the Give It DApp and have that going. So, I mean, that's like most of Team 3's work, honestly, is just Give It DApp. So it's not like as far as React components and stuff, we have one little piece, which is nominating milestones to be voted on in Team 2 in their conviction voting DAO. And that's it. So like other than that, it's all back-end stuff. Making sure that when a milestone pays out, the money, the tokens, the money that is paid out actually goes to the bonding curve, and then spits out tokens. But there's that's like reusing buttons and that kind of stuff,
Cool. Yeah, maybe there's no.
So what I'm saying is Team 3 is a good thing to build off of, like the Give It DApp basically, and using that formatting or React templates that they have.
Oh, right, yeah. So that could be the core.
Yeah, that's what I would say. I mean, it's using React, it's using Node.js.
I'll look into it. So that's the link you posted, right, on top.
Yeah. We use this thing called Feathers, which basically is a caching layer on top of the blockchain. And so I imagine we would just interact directly with Feathers in a MongoDB database. I don't even know if that matters. Basically using React scripts.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like one thing I'd be big on is kind of getting, because I really always find like the setting up of a new project can be a bit of a hassle and take a lot of time. So it'd be cool if you could just go and know, like, I've got this template, create React app type thing that I'm going to start building on, rather than having to like do that. at the start. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. No,
I mean,
setting up a new environment is like fucking a battle, you know?
Can be.
Every time. Okay, I will go shield the link and see if we can get some people to show up. So Jordan can't make it.
Minutes. That's cool. So what else I want to catch? So like for us, Team 1, we are going to be making a UI that visualizes these token bonding curves, ideally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it probably doesn't need to, like, it would be great if you use the same buttons and stuff, you know, and try to make it connect, but there's not a whole lot of overlap.
Yeah, for sure. So one thing I wanted to say is, you know, we got given this like crib sheet for, you know, when we were on that call with Abe and stuff, and they kind of had their own parameters sort of already decided on. I don't know if this is going to be possible, but like it'd be cool to say, yeah, and one of the things that we could do is instantiate our curve or our project using their sort of design parameters. Because the whole point is it's supposed to be something that is generic and can be like done however. Maybe that's something to...
No, now is the time to decide that, because the dream would be that we get math working for all three teams. And especially Team 1 and Team 2 have a lot of math that needs to interface. And because we're not doing, like, it's such a complex system, if like the math that we use needs to work for, it is only going to work in specific ranges. The final product, it'll work for like the whole thing.
Sure.
But like we need to make sure that it's like, okay, the token supply is this. And, you know, like, and if it gets too much, or, you know, our numbers in Team 2 won't work.
Right. So, yes, maybe. But I just think it's something that we should talk about, you know, when we're talking about, like, at the end, we'll say, oh, and also we reckon it's very possible to instantiate like a group with the parameters that ODYSSEY sort of like.
Well, if you guys have those parameters now, we can start with those. That's why I'm saying, like, we just need to make sure that, like, ASAP that we nail this down.
We'll see what the others think. They just had some weird things like 45%, you know, those circles, like 45% builders, 45% investors, or I don't know. They're a bit weird parameters, I thought, but they had clearly put some thought into it.
That's interesting.
Must be able to. Yes, it's this thing. It's called economically viable protocols or something. Let me see. Put it in the chat.
The comment stack. It's I posted the link in the Telegram group.
That's the meeting.
Hey, Devlin.
Yay.
Ooh, our feedback's not so bad.
Yep.
We'll play the mute game. Dapline and I are actually in the same room, just very different backgrounds.
In the same room.
Yeah. Yeah. Ah.
Whereabouts are you?
Barcelona.
That's sweet.
Where are you?
Edinburgh.
Edinburgh, nice.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's awesome, man.
Yeah. Well, I just moved. Yeah, I've been here 6 months. It's cool. I like Edinburgh. Nice spot.
Are you a developer, man?
Yeah, I'm a software developer. I'm currently doing a PhD, but I was a developer first.
Nice.
I can do Solidity a little bit. Not big. I prefer React. But I understand it. I just haven't really had like a lot of exposure to it.
Are you experienced with GitHub and Git?
Am I experienced?
Yeah.
Yeah, reasonably. Why?
Do you know how to fix deep history duplication at the root level?
No, I'm not that experienced. What? How do you mean? Like deep history? You got some merge conflict?
No, it's way serious than that. So like the whole history is duplicated with a different root in the same Git history. Hello.
Yeah, I'm not that experienced.
Just a second, please.
Hey, folks.
Hey, Svanet. We're just waiting for our fearless leader to make it. Abby said she'd be a little late. I muted you, Svanet, just in case there's some background noise. Oh, look at that. That's nice, though. You made a little React simulation. Hey, Josh.
Hello.
Did you see my messages, Josh, in the Team1 chat?
I just saw it a second ago on the way in here. But yeah, I can talk to the ODYSSEY people and explain some switcheroos once I figure out what's actually happened properly.
For sure.
Hey guys.
Hola.
Hey, Abby.
Can you hear me? Sorry for being late. So I had to get my phone from my hotspot. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. It's a little windy.
Okay.
But
I'll stay.
I think we'll survive.
Talking. Is it good? Cool.
Yeah. So it's your show, Abby. I don't know if you want to take it away.
So I was really hoping, so I think that we need to, one, introduce our two new team members and get aligned around that. So Dapline and Jordan could not be on, so we'll have to record this and then send it to him. But I wanted to align around stuff. I don't know who we have on call. Svanet, Josh, and Pavle. Perfect. So really, I wanted to be able to coordinate between Pavle and Jordan, who are, or who's doing, is Jordan React or Dapline? Are you more in the Solidity side of the world?
I'm everywhere. I need to be. So React and Solidity, both are fine.
Okay.
Yeah, very badass statement.
One, I want to get download from your and Griff's conversation about the math yesterday, and then see if there's any insights coming out of that would inform our spec, but then kind of get Pavle and whoever else wants to do Solidity, Dapline, I'm assuming that's also you, to figure out, you know, what do we want our implementation for the hackathon to be, based off of what we have the capacity to do so. So then we can get the information that we need from Corey and from Seth regarding that. So that was the first agenda item. The second was talking through design, if Will's on, but I don't think Will's on. So maybe Griff, Spinette, and John.
Hi, one. Hello?
Yeah, but you've gone.
There goes Abby.
You guys hear me? I dropped out.
Yeah, just to note, Will's up in the corner as well.
You're back.
Cool. Well, then we can chat about that too. And then game plan, any work that we're doing today. It's morning here, so I'm going to be spending some time on this. So Griff and Dapline, do you guys want to give an update on your math conversation yesterday?
Yeah, no, sorry. I didn't find that mute. I mean, I didn't progress anything. I was just basically recreating what was done to really understand what's going on and why. So no progress, just comprehension. And I do indeed have some doubts, but it's very like teeny details of the math. I don't know if I should throw them now or later.
We can save math for later and more talk about, yeah, sure. And more talk about maybe what we expect with now the team that we have, with hopefully one more dev, and talk about that. And then we can dive deeper into math if you want, like right after this. Okay. But I guess like the key question that coming out of this is like kind of what is our game plan for Team 1 right now, with the resources that we have at our disposal, right? And so it seems like it's going to be very much so focusing on like a React front end that's just really pulling in data from, you know, a bonding curve sim, unless we can get those contract deploys with some potential, you know, Pavle, the repo that Corey sent you, you know, that one, and if we can hack together something with there. So that's kind of where I'm trying to figure out is like with this, the repo that Corey sent with the work that's been put into this so far, can we actually deploy something live and use that to pull live data into the front end? Or are we just going to be doing kind of hard coding the JavaScript sim Spinette? That's what, you know, we were talking about yesterday with the JavaScript versus the Python. That's kind of where I see two paths. What does everybody think about that? Or do we see other paths? Griff, what does that sound like to you?
I mean, I'm definitely, okay, I'll just talk through Daplines. I'm definitely one for saying screw Solidity. Like it's cool, it would be great, but there's a lot of scope to deal with, and there's a lot of problems that will come up trying to deploy something on Ethereum.
Yeah.
So are you saying we just like run a back end?
Yeah. Run a JavaScript. Say, hey, guess what? We can do this as a token, and we will.
Yeah,
we will.
Good
so, but I mean, honestly, the UX and getting the math right and putting that display, we have to do all that, no matter what we get done on Solidity. So Solidity can be a bonus.
Yeah, I'm for that. I think Solidity can take too much time messing around.
Yeah, because the only really thing that I haven't, again, gotten an update from Corey on was using the work done with the fundraising app, which is Aragon, Griff, which we've been wanting to stay away from. But I don't even know the progress of that project yet. I can put it in this chat right here. Give me a second. So it'd be using that. It'd be using the other repo that he sent us. I'm just providing all options that we've gathered through working with Corey and stuff like that. I can just find that 1 second.
Yeah, I'm just all for cutting scope. Whatever scope we can cut, like focus on a couple things, and then, oh wow, we have extra time. Let's do the Solidity.
Okay. What does everybody think about that?
Yeah, maybe I can just pitch in my thoughts. So what I've been trying to do, like for the last hour or so, is like getting a simulation of that conviction function running in a React front end.
Yeah.
What I want to try to do, and I think that might apply to the rest of the scope, or at least the priorities, because the overall scope, of course, would be that Solidity is part of the whole equation. But I would be very happy if we can get like simulation working that's coherent with the math that we have, but also is coherent with what we can actually implement in Solidity at a later stage in time. So I was looking at that. So what I did actually right now is I took all the analysis that Tapline did in that HackMD document and the code that he created, and I ported it to like in a React app just to create to draw these graphs. But I wanted to do sort of to wrap all the functions that he created in the calculations into that math.js library so that we can make sure that it sort of works with like fixed point arithmetic and see what comes out of that and just visualize that so we can at least see and like play around with these parameters. So if you go down that path, then we know that whatever comes out of that JavaScript, and maybe you like run it into some sort of a library, then we know for sure that that's something we can implement later on in Solidity. And then, like Griff said, like doing it in Solidity would be a bonus then. And I think when I have that thing nailed down with like the function that we already have for the conviction voting curve, if that already works and I can manage to wrap that into that Math.js library, then I mean that could be like the basis maybe of implementing the other functions like the token bonding curve maybe. That's how I see it.
Yeah, that seems, I mean, to me, from what I'm hearing, and if I'm understanding correctly, that seems like the most efficient option that gives us the most output put in without diving too deep down the Solidity rabbit hole that we've been getting ourselves in, you know? And I think that would be super valuable because say we get it all done, Griff is right, maybe we can hack together something in Solidity if we have more time, but we're able to front load a lot of the work this week, getting that front end together and pulling from that, you know, so that actually kind of makes a lot of sense to me if everybody's on board for that and we can game plan around that. What does everybody think? Good?
I think it sounds fine to me. I'm not entirely sure I understand like yourself, but yeah, it sounded good.
I just wanted to, because if I understand correctly, is there going to be some kind of interaction between our project and the rest of the projects that the teams are, the other teams are building? And if that interaction is going to happen, don't we have to have something built, you know, and deployed on a contract so they can pull the data from the contract and use it, or is it just going to be very loosely connected? That's the only thing that I didn't really understand from the previous story.
I would say loosely connected, narrative based, for sure.
You muted yourself, bro.
Lion muted me, but it's better this way because now I don't hear myself. The goal should be that we have as much like collaboration as possible, and anything that anyone else does, each other team can use and to prop themselves up. But we want to be able to insulate ourselves from any issues where some team doesn't perform, and then that. And by perform, I mean they just have bad luck for one reason or another. And then that brings down the other teams. So we need to insulate ourselves from each other while propping each other up. And I think that's best done by saying, oh, hey, like team 3 needs to interact with team 1, right? Well, not really. We need to interact with some token contract. We need to generate a token. If you guys don't have a token contract, dude, that's Zeppelin. You know, I can just I can deploy a token contract. It's not that hard. Like we can deploy something. It doesn't have to be team 1's, and we can get that same like, oh look, we created a token instead of giving someone X die, right? Like, okay, done. You know, and then but we use the stories. You know, all the stories are the same. And I think on the code side, there's a lot less. There should be as little interaction as necessary as we can pull off. On the narrative side, there should be a lot of interaction, and on the design side, this is what Will was talking about earlier. We should probably try to connect things a little bit.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, I think that the loosely connected can be more connected through the design. And I think that specifically, I just think that the bonding curve and conviction voting kind of go hand in hand. So it might be good to kind of go towards the design together to make sure, because I know that, again, what we talked about, Josh, with our track during that workshop is that they were already asking questions about how the system works with the other modules. So being able to show them, whether that's just through a loosely connected UI, would benefit our team's track, and I think also Team 2's track. So that's really where I see the most actual like connection with the design. But the rest of them, I think you're right, it should just be narrative. And then we see what happens, and maybe there's more ways to, you know, connect on the back end. But I don't think we should be, you know, over-speccing ourselves too much right now.
Yeah, so I mean, I think on that, like for the CSS at a minimum, we can definitely have a common CSS library code thing that we just write, at least just like the basic stuff, like what does our buttons look like? All that stuff could just be the same. And it saves time, and it should work pretty easily, I think.
Yeah, and also think for the math aspect, the like I think it's pretty easy to define what the input is that we should receive from the token bonding curve to start calculating conviction on certain proposals. So I think there's a way to sort of structure that we say, okay, like we have, for example, from Team 1, and if we all use like a React front end, I think it's pretty easy to just like dump it in like in the state. It's like, okay, from like for our part, for the conviction part, we just receive some state that says, okay, like these are the token holders, and they all have this amount of tokens, and this is like the total amount of tokens that exist. That might be enough. Maybe I'm forgetting some details, but like that should be like the base set where we can do all the rest of our calculations on top of. And then maybe from Team 3, we will receive like a list of proposals that says like, this is the title of the proposal. This is, I don't know, like the amount of money asked for, maybe some other parameters, and just in a list. That's also part of the state that we receive. And if we have that, then we can do all the rest ourselves, I guess. And once we have like a trigger that's being crossed, that says, okay, this proposal can pass now, then we just adjust the state, and then Team 3 can go from there, so to speak. So I think if we just define how that state should look like, which components, which names we're going to use for these variables, I think that might be enough to tie these things together at a later stage.
So can I just to clarify, maybe for everybody, but also for me too, on the math. So on the math library that you're putting together, Swanet, how does Zargum's math, the Python notebook that he threw together, how does that play into the math library? And can we play it into the math library? Do you know what I mean? Like, how does that translate?
Yeah, it's not 100% clear to me because I haven't been analyzing all the math myself. I think Griffin Dapline have been more into that. Yeah, there should be. I think that's the biggest challenge also for me right now to get like a sort of I would say JavaScript implementation, but that's not true. It's more like a Solidity compatible implementation, so to speak, like with some averages, some approximations of functions and like stuff we can build there. Into JavaScript. Let me quickly share my screen just to show the approach I'm taking. Like it's really preliminary still, but just to give an idea.
Maybe just to say, I think that we're going to use the Zargum stuff. It's not about like the formulas. The formulas are easy. It's parameters and choosing parameters, which Zargum stuff didn't do for us. We just have to choose parameters and lock them down, so that other teams, when we make a trigger function, we're just going to pull the trigger function out of our ass and plot 3 points that make sense for the trigger function. But if we do that and then team 1 changes the total supply, that can fuck everything. So we just have to like really nail things down.
So and by what you mean by the parameters is the initial, like the initialization variables, so like the initial raise and the initial price point, and then the power function that we're using, the power function invariant, like the S to the 6 or something. Why? So I thought that we kind of did set those parameters, like within.
The S6 isn't a parameter.
That's just a shape.
That's the formula. Yeah.
Yeah.
The price, how much is the initial raise? Well, it's a parameter, yeah, in the thing. But like we pick 1, 4, or 6, and we pick the but we gotta like not change them, and we gotta make sure like what the results are going to be.
Yeah, I feel like we have the information to make that decision based off of the return rate graph that we have. And then the other spectrum of return rate versus initial raise. Like we have the graphs to kind of choose. So maybe we just make a decision after that.
We just have to choose, and then we also have to say like, okay, now how many speculators are going to buy in afterwards, right? Like and then how
and like do that by a range.
Yeah, how big are the milestones going to be that the DAO pays for? You know. All of these random, like, here's our scenario of like a working system. Here's the actions that are going to happen. And now and then we don't change it. And we work with it.
Okay. So yeah, we should make that an action item to come up with today. But Spana, I know that you wanted to share your screen. Do you want to walk through what you have shared?
Yeah, so like this is some like kind of visualization I had like in the back of my mind to show. So it's just like that you can create like a list of like a visualization of this. Like this is a proposal, pay 1,000 to X, and then you can just play around with the alpha variable in the conviction function here to see what it gives. So that's like I think how it could look. And then so the list of proposals would be like a state that we receive from team 3, so to speak. And then the parameters of because it's not included here yet, the trigger value could be mapped here on the graph as well. That's something that should come out of the parameters that we receive from team 1. But then just to show the code, so I just have like a simple like conviction voting component here that just renders that graph, and it has something here that says like recalculate, and then so for any point in like for a range of time points, it will calculate the conviction.
Sorry, that's awesome, Swan. That looks fucking badass.
Oh, sorry. But what I actually wanted to show you, so I separated, like this is like a function get conviction, which takes all the parameters that are required to calculate it, and this is like literally the code that Dapline has come up with after his calculations there. But this is like plain JavaScript, and so it just returns a y value for any given point. So that's where what I'm iterating over time, so to speak, to calculate that graph of the conviction. So what I want to do right here in this function is make it so include the mat.js functions here. So instead of like calculating a power here, literally doing it with a mat.js thing, and then we can switch to fixed point arithmetic, which is compatible with the way that Solidity will work in the end. And then we can really make sure that the value y that comes out of here will have the same value as if we would implement this in Solidity. And so it will sort of yield to the same results. And so what I was envisioning, but I mean, it's open to discussion, of course, is that we create like a conviction lip and then maybe another lip, which is like a bonding lip or something, or bonding curve lip, which does sort of the same. So, and then if we can create like a bonding curve JS component, then it would be pretty easy to throw everything together here and sort of exchange state from one component to the other. And so this conviction voting module or a component that I've created here could be one that is just an array. So you could create an array of these components from all the probably from all the proposals that come from Team 3, and then just see what it gives. And I mean, I don't know all the answers right now, but maybe we should add something that's like in each conviction voting module right here. There should be a notion of who's voting on this proposal. But that's, of course, I mean, if I continue too much on this, I'm already implementing everything that should be implemented on the during the hackathon, I guess. But that's sort of the approach I had in mind. So, but it's just like, it's a suggestion. It's not Python, of course, but I think it might be compatible with what we want to be building in the end.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the best way forwards. And we should totally kind of just work to get that. I think that would make sense, right?
Yeah. Are you going to push this to a code base somewhere?
Yeah, sure. Like I said, I just started like an hour ago fiddling around with it. So I'll push it and I'll post a repo later on in the channel.
Nice,
yeah,
dude.
so yeah, that looks dope. On the Team1 devs, how can we support Spawnette getting the like getting our JS component right, and pulling what we have from Zargum's math somehow into JavaScript, and how can we maybe do some of that today? This is a question to like Will, Dapline, and Pavle. Like, what do you guys think about game planning around that?
I think Dapline was a little distracted just now.
Yeah.
Go
I don't. How? So like, you mean like we should write the math similar to that for the curve?
Yeah, well, so actually, Will, I think that you and I should tag team the design, and we should focus on getting the React stuff up. But I think that was more of a question to Dapline and Pavle, and then Jordan, when he watches this, is that how can we now manage and game plan around kind of Spawnette's plan? Because I think that's kind of the best plan that would give us the maximum output coming out of this, and then we can figure out the solidity, if we need to, during the weekend. But I think that what Spawnette's proposing is actually like a really, really great, awesome way forward. So I wonder how we can support and make this happen for like Team1 too. So Pavle and Dapline, what do you guys think about getting our math into a JS component?
Well, I guess Dapline has more experience, but I definitely agree that you can use the libraries, and you should have this similar kind of precision, similar kind of results. We're not dealing with any kind of scientific computation, so yeah, this should work. Also, I think this also can be layered into the smart contracts, where we sort of offload all the heavy lifting stuff into the JS library, and then if we want to have a contract, but we don't have the time to implement it, or we run into like a snag or something, then we can just have like an Oracle, or basically a trusted server that does the trusted computing for the curve, feeds it back into it, and then we just run it for demonstration purposes, which is better than having nothing. As for implementation, Spawnette, I'm not. How much code do you have to write? It's because it seems like all of that. There's a lot of mathematical formula, but it should translate into like maybe a dozen functions and stuff like that. So in that sense, maybe we can help testing it out. Maybe we can see if we can figure out like a static data set that we can just run through and make sure everything works. So we have everything ready even before we start. That's like one way to go about it. Lion, what do you think?
I can do the contract. And to be honest, I think the math at the end is easier than how it looks like. So now that I have read the HackMD, it looks way more intimidating than what it really needs to be implemented at the end. So there is a lot of work and equations towards getting graphs to see how the different parameters affect the behavior in terms of profitability and etc. But at the end, the equation that we have to throw in the smart contract or whatever, I think it's just two equations. You have to compute the initial supply with basic arithmetics, and then you have to compute the price at like when you mint and when you burn, which is a little bit more complicated, but it's just one equation. So, and for the conviction voting, it's already done. So you just have to write, well, it's already written. You just have to copy the code I did into some contract, test it, make sure everything works fine. But I think it's doable. If we test it correct, if we test it fine, because if we deploy this Griff, where should we do it? Like in a private chain, in Rinkeby or Corley or Rinkeby?
Rinkeby.
Okay.
But I really hope we can stay with this idea of, man, it's so hard because I hear myself. I hope we can stay.
Someone's muted.
Sorry.
I hope yourself again.
I hope we can stay with this idea of doing the JavaScript first. Do it all in JavaScript first. Make sure the JavaScript, because we need to, no matter what, we need to do the JavaScript.
Can we like do the JavaScript this week and focus on getting the UI for front loading a lot of the work for the UI and then doing the contract at the hack? Like, do you think that that's possible, Daplion?
Yeah, and like, do you have time today? You and I can try to work with Spunnet a little bit, or not even directly with Spunnet, but just like to like hack it out while you're here today.
Yeah, actually, when I did the math for the conviction, I did it first with Node.js, and then I moved it to Solidity.
Yeah.
So, I guess.
So same.
Yeah.
So here we should be thinking about it interfacing with React instead of interfacing it with Solidity.
Yeah,
so
I think in
what
the
I'm
end,
hearing,
if you,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, finish. I was gonna try to wrap up our insights. Keep going.
Yeah, what I wanted to say is that I think if we wrap it in Solidity later on, I mean, there's only so many things we need to implement then, because if everything's sort of mapped through that Mat.js library, we already have the fixed point arithmetic. There's just like these few storage variables that we need to store in these contracts. I think it's pretty easy. And I was just thinking about like the workload. So isn't there really any limitation that we have for the hackathon? Because if we use this week to already like implement 75% of what we anticipated on doing on the hackathon, what else are we gonna do there? I mean, the nightlife seems to be good in Groningen, so that's a good. We could enjoy that a little bit. But what are we gonna do back there?
Well, just everyone gets on Tinder. We bring people to the boat, and we have one hell of a fucking party.
Oh my God, this boat.
Yeah, it's weird because I'm used to the FCC hackathons. No, sorry, the F, whatever hackathons that you have to strictly don't do anything before. But yeah, I guess this is different.
I say we try to do as much as possible. Can I try to repeat back what I heard on what our game plan is right now? And people can correct me if I'm not using the correct wording. So our kind of spec right now is to create a Solidity compatible JavaScript component library to simulate the math functions of the augmented bonding curve and the conviction voting trigger functions to use a React front end that Team 1 and Team 2 will kind of game plan to create like a shared Figma project on. And then the additional scope is then possibly deploying that JavaScript in Solidity during the hackathon. Am I hearing everything correctly?
I would say one on top of that, first step, get the math, but then pick parameters and scream it like these are, in fact, I'm going to try to push that.
Well, let's just do that today. Let's just get on. I mean, like I'm down. I have all day to work on this. So like I say that we get the parameters right now. We do a big push to the ODYSSEY Hackathon group. Hey guys, this is the parameters for all the teams that we're working on, right? And then we focus on kind of getting some designs that we could start pushing to. and then we focus on getting the math and JavaScript. And I'd love to just, I don't know how much I can help with that, but I'd love to be on the call when you guys are figuring that out, if possible.
Yeah, 0.3 and 6.
I just have one thing on the maths. Like, it's not just doing. This is really, we want to have like some stateful backend in JavaScript. It's not just the equations, right? This is like our backend. Really. This is our contract. We want this contract, but just in JavaScript.
Yeah, I mean, do we want to use some caching layer and have a database like MongoDB and Feathers? I mean, that's what team 3 is using. I know that's what Dappline wants.
I tolerate some sort of remix IDE stuff, so where you just simulate the contract for the sake of simpleness in JavaScript, but no feathers, please. No feathers. It's not that expensive to query the blockchain.
Okay. So actually, I wanted to bring up. So, I mean, I've had a little look through the ODYSSEY documentation stuff, and it seems like they're quite keen on us having like nice code, like clean code. Like you get like an award thing, like your project gets like a clean code award. So like, and they have a meeting about it. So I think it'd be good if someone from Team 1 went to that talk. I can't remember what it's called. It's like, is your hackathon a good prototype or something like that?
Yeah, they're assessing the maturity of code.
Yeah.
So after a certain range, you'll get a golden balloon as well.
You get a what?
You get a golden balloon that symbolizes your team has good code.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But how can you value
bring those ourselves?
It doesn't make any sense.
Say that again, Dappline.
Yeah, how can you value clean code at a hackathon? That doesn't make any sense. Like, the encouragement is just hack it, right? Like,
well, I guess the spirit of this whole event is more like it's more like you come in there and you don't really hack it together. It's like everybody's prepared. You know, you're just supposed to build that shit together, get a pitch ready, and then shoot for the incubator, I guess. So maybe in that sense, yeah, that sort of made sense to someone. What do they mean by mature code, though? Like what? Like test coverage, good composition, good architecture, good design?
I think this is still going to be very much like a hackathon type clean code, but there's still like a good way, you know, like it should be a well-organized project and like have some good structure to it. I don't think like good code coverage or anything like that. Well, I don't know. That's why we need to go to their presentation.
They'll assess foundations to see how shaky they are and whether things can actually be built off them in future, or whether it's just like one and done, shoot for the moon and kind of run.
Okay, that makes sense, I guess.
There's more stuff as well around on the website that I'll fish out for you guys if you like. I'll get digging on that. God knows where. But.
Okay. And then game who want to make something more animated and drive.
Abby, you're like all robot.
Robot, Terminator.
Pavle, where did you want to jump in on this? I know Dappline and I are hitting the math. It sounds like Will.
My Bluetooth headphones die, which usually happens all the time. So
yeah.
I was just saying that, Will, if you want to send more information on that so we can figure out who wants to own that, if that's something that we want to focus on, like doing clean code or something. So
yeah, I mean, I'll find out what it is. I could go. I did want to go to another one on that. I mean, I'd be happy to like try and push for that. I think it's important.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'll get to the presentation. Well, maybe.
Cool.
So it sounds like Dappline is in charge of math, and it kind of sounds like Will is more going to be our designer. Is that right?
No, I'm not a designer. I'm definitely not.
No, I think that I'm taking the ad hoc role of designer, and Will and I are gonna scrap through a really nice front end, and we're gonna spend some time today on doing that. And that's definitely what I'm making my goal. We did this, so I did the stuff in Framer for Denver, and it came out okay. So I think that we'll be fine. And if we need to, we'll pull in some more UX UI people after we just get something frameworked out today, you know? And then we'll have a better idea of where the design sits by the end of today. Will, I know I'm going to put in some serious work to it as well. So it seems like Will and I will focus on kind of getting a baseline for what our front end will look like and how it will function. Dapline and Griff and Sponette will try to maybe find some time today to get the math in JavaScript and start structuring that back end. And then Pavle, maybe you can contribute to that as well, or maybe you and Dapline can chat about the potential of implementing this in Solidity. And then Griff, we just talk about parameters right after this and get that to everybody. That's like the first step. I feel like that's what I'm pulling from this conversation right now. Anything else that we want to focus on?
I'm curious, Pavle, if you have any other things that you think you might want to push for this, like.
Well, I'm thinking about it. We mentioned a few things before. So obviously, on the dev side, I guess I'd be most useful in Solidity. So if we're gonna look at it, I can look at it. I can also write tests for the contracts if we get to that point to see if everything matches out. And if you need my help, I'm not a designer. I'm not much of a visual person, but I can also help out with the UI UX later today. And finally, there was some talk about narrative, so matching and like not matching, but like not streamlining. Griff, you had a good word for it. Like having the same or similar narrative across all projects. So if you need help with that, I'm also game to if there's anything that needs to be done on that front. But basically, yeah, I'll be free later today, so I guess that's gonna be like evening here in my home country. So that is where I think I can fit in. If anybody has any better ideas, like let me know. I'm pretty flexible, so I'll try and do the best that I can at any thing.
Cool, that sounds good. Yeah, I think that it's kind of like Griff and Dapline, depending on how much progress you guys make on the math library today, how much that pulls then into, I mean, the contract conversation, right? And then looping in Pavle when it seems right, or looping into the math stuff. And I'll let you guys manage that.
Yeah, I'll add you to the math chat, and maybe we'll try to work on the same we could try to do a video call, but that ends up just being more chatter and distraction than it's worth. So let's just try to coordinate in the Telegram group. If I can get Dapline to play with Telegram, he had to download it yesterday.
Use Telegram, please. Lion, come on, man.
He just got a new computer. I'm giving him a hard time.
Okay.
I'll add you to the math group, and let's see where we can fit you in on helping out with this JavaScript library stuff, because I think that's where we'll need the most help.
Yeah,
it sounds like Will has a lot of time. Yeah, Will?
I'd be interested to, when you do get it like ready or like deployed, I mean, to GitHub, push to GitHub, I'd definitely be interested to take a look.
Can you add me to the chat too, Griff, just so I can be watch?
Oh wow, you're not in that? Okay, yeah, for sure.
No, I'm not.
So then I also had one other thing, which is I don't know if you've seen on the Odyssey like chat thing. There's a lot of people like posting their Jedi profiles. So I mean, I've not really been paying too much attention, but like there was one that I read that I thought sounded quite good and like sort of relevant to what we're doing. So I think just to a point to say like we should kind of be thinking about who are the Jedis we want to get involved or like definitely want to talk to.
Who was it? Do you remember?
It's in the chat. There's this. I put a link.
Yeah, I'd have a look at that if I were you, Griff. It looks pretty good. It's the IXO guys, which are essentially doing Giveth in a different way, but he's putting his hands up, going, "Anyone want help and stuff?"
Nice.
Yeah, exactly. It'd just be interesting to see what he thinks about this idea, and because obviously he's done something similar.
Also, our track leaders were supposed to send us a list of the experts that were on the track for us to, talk to, but they still haven't done that. So maybe I'll follow up with them too, because I think that they're also Jedis. I'm not sure. The same thing that you're saying, Will.
Yeah, they'll be Jedi.
Maybe we could just have like a nice list or something of these are the Jedis we think are, going to be useful to us.
For sure. Actually, I'll think about noting that. On a separate note, before the call starts winding up and stuff, just to be alert that Team 4 have lost their one of their coders. So if we find extra coders, defer back over to Team 4.
Okay, who'd they lose?
Max.
Okay, cool. Cool. Okay, is there any other things that we need to nail down? Abby, you and I are going to stay on this call, it sounds like, and just do math?
Yeah, let's just stay on and just talk about the parameters, and then we'll just all keep looped in today. And then I'll reach out to you, and we can figure out how we want to game plan the design. Griff and Dapline will start focusing on the math, loop in Pavle, and then we can start, at least getting that foundation and then figuring out the contract stuff later, is what I'm hearing. And I think that's a really good plan.
Yeah.
Cool?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So everybody just keep posting in the group and stuff like that, and raising questions and updates, and we can keep going. And I'll go to meet in Amsterdam in a week.
Yeah, perfect. Oh, we had lists of people who were nominated to represent certain things. And Pavle, you were the integration guy, right? So maybe you can work with us also on a little bit of Team 3 math integration, because that's something.
Okay. Sure. Why not? I think that's a good idea.
Cool. Cool. Okay.
Cool. Bye, guys.
Sorry, I have one other thing, which is kind of, I'm actually going to be there in Groningen on the Wednesday. I don't know if anybody else is going to be.
Somebody is. Check the ODYSSEY housing spreadsheet. That has everyone's arrival date. And I did see some other people that said 10th.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm just looking for accommodation. I might even try to get a couch surfing or something like that.
Yeah, and I think Kai has a couch. I think Kai's somebody who you could crash with.
Okay. Well, cool. Sweet.
Okay.
That's the way to go.
See you guys.
Bye, guys.
Oh.
Hi.
How's it going, Abby?
Oh my God, I can hear both of you guys.
Can I shoot first some deep questions about what I read on the HackMD to you, or are you the correct person to ask?
Sure, totally. I will try to answer them to the best of my ability.
Okay, I assume you are very familiar with the Jupyter notebook and equations or whatever.
As familiar as my expertise allows, but familiar because I've been writing out the primer for it and stuff like that. So yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen.
Okay.
Application window. Okay, you should. Are you seeing yourself?
Yes.
Now, are you seeing HackMD?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. Okay, so I was just playing around with it for a bit, and one issue I found is, okay, let's assume. I mean, I know it breaks the idea of the system, but let's assume that there is no initial pool. Yeah. Okay. Are you there? So it means that theta is 0.
Okay.
Which means that the initial reserve is equal to the amount of die that you raise. If you work the equations, like first you find that the return factor P1 divided by P0 is kappa. Which, I mean, I did the math, and of course the math is right, and it says so, but I don't understand why that's happened conceptually. Like, why, if you just throw money in there, why do you have something that's worth more than what you put immediately without any initial pool?
Mm-hmm.
It's the market cap.
Yeah.
It's the market cap illusion. It's because the average price is one thing, and the price for the next person to buy is another.
Okay, I guess that relates, because what I did just to check is, you have the equations for the supply and reserve as a function of price.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay, I'm going to just say, what's the supply of P0 with these assumptions, assuming that theta is 0,
Mm-hmm.
and you get these interesting equations of that. So in that case, if theta is 0, the supply, the theoretically supply that was existing when you bought was this. So, okay, just looking at the graph. So I guess what I was curious is, what's the assumed price that you are buying when you buy in this system? Do you know what I mean?
What is the assumed price that you're buying when you're buying into the system? So I feel like that's where this whole realized price equations that are under the deposit to mint and burn to withdraw mechanisms come into play. In that the assumed price is used with right there with the realized price, the P bar data R.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we're computing the assumed price of the curve. And then this math was confusing to me, so I might not be able to explain it completely, but the whole concept with these mechanisms is that they're really just energy conservation principles, and that the realized price takes the change in the reserve over the change of the supply based off of a deposit or a mint. And then what does it say? Computes that along the entire curve to get the spot price and compute it with the price function. So that's how that we're computing the assumed price, is with this realized price equation.
So to be honest, this doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
Because why do you take the limit when the delta reserve is 0? Why? I mean, that's not true. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, I think that I think the realized price is what you're computing at, and then the taking the limit back to the spot price is supposed to that was really to prove the slippage within the curve. So based off of like the price function, I think from what I understood from Zargham correctly, is that the realized price means that we're taking the price based off of the mechanism function and not off of the price function that we defined at the beginning. So not off of the shape of the curve, but he's showing how that the realized price is has minimal slippage in accordance to the spot price, which is what you get when you take the limit towards 0.
But I mean, it will always depend on how much money you are throwing in.
Should I try to get, so Zargham's messaging me right now. Should I try to get him to hop on this call really quickly?
Yes.
To answer these questions? Okay, let me just
message
him, because he will be able to. Okay, but probably not. 1 second,
Because,
message him. He's going to be able to, so this is his whole thing with like, he's building a new energy in this state space, and it was something that took me like a couple conversations with him to comprehend on my level. So let's get him on and see if he can just kind of walk it through.
Because in my head, how the price should be computed is with this equation, which I think I'm missing something here, which is just basically the integrated average over your like buy range, and that will work. However, like even if it's delta R is really big, that it should be correct.
Sorry, I'm messaging him, and I wasn't looking at your screen. Wait, Z just said, I need 3 minutes, and then he can. So let's wait 3 minutes, and then we can get on the phone. That's perfect.
Okay.
And can you just repeat your question? So, oh my God, I lost you. Where did it go? Okay, there you are. Can you repeat what question that you just said? Because I was writing a message to him.
Yeah,
right here with the medium price.
Okay, so when you buy,
Mm-hmm.
the price is going to change.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what should be fair is that the price that you pay is the average price of your buy range.
The average price of your buy range.
It's not the average. That's where there's the limit, right? It's like the price for every token.
Okay, but he's just computed the limit. Then he should integrate it. And with this equation, I mean, I don't understand what's the point, because obviously if you take the limit, you're gonna get the price. With this equation is the price that he has described previously. So it makes sense, but it doesn't provide any extra methodology in how, you know what I mean? Like when you got to this point, he's saying, yeah, the price at air is this equation that we already got at this point.
I mean, we'll see what he says. I think what Abby said was basically his goal with that was to show that the price doesn't change that much unless you buy a lot.
Well, it would change depending on the parameters and how much you buy, depending relative to whatever.
Yeah.
But that's not.
Well, he's saying that even if you have any parameters, it shouldn't change that much.
I mean, it depends. We could compute exactly how much it should change at each spot of the curve with each delta R. We could compute that. Well, I think he did at the bottom, right? Like with this
slippage.
And the concept with, I guess, comparing the realized price to the spot price was, again, to show that even at very small transactions, the slippage is minimal. So this only what Griff was just saying was that only these large buys. That's
anyway, this doesn't show that. This is just taking the limit.
No. So what I'm hearing from you is that with this median price is that there's no equation that's really actually showing how the price is computed at a point in the curve, because the realized price with the limit isn't really giving you that etymology that we need to compute the price. Is that what I'm hearing correctly?
Kind of. And also, where should we compute the price? We should compute the price at the reserve that there was before you buy, or that the reserve after you buy, if you're gonna just use one price.
Okay, I see what you're saying. And yeah, that definitely isn't clear exactly, because I just thought that it was through the realized price equation, but I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
You could compute the arithmetic average, which will be imprecise, but better than just taking one of the two. And then if you want to do exactly, you should do this, which is maybe, I don't know. So this will be the exact price.
Well, Zargam's on right now, so Hazy. Uh-oh, he's frozen. That's my face on your screen.
Double AV.
He might be frozen, but he's on. So let's wait for him to get on, and then you can kind of repeat this question.
Okay.
I see what you're saying, though, and I feel like that's key to figure out for anything that we're doing with the math library. So
yeah, exactly.
Hey, Zargam.
Hello.
Can you hear us?
Okay, so repeat the question.
Hello. Are you in? Send me confirmation. I'm not seeing Jitsi screen.
Yeah, he's in.
Well, there he is.
Okay, so quickly, I read through your HackMD and redid the math myself just to learn it a little bit, and just to play around with it and really grasp how it's it. I said, okay, let's assume theta is 0, so no initial reserve for the DAO, and let's see how the math plays out. And when you have theta equal to 0, the return factor P1 over P0 is still kappa. And I was wondering why was it happening conceptually? Like what's essentially the question is, why do you have a P0 different than P1 such that you have a return immediately? I don't know if I'm explaining correctly.
My connection isn't phenomenal because I'm in a hotel. I can sort of explain it to you, but it's a kind of a piece of math that I might have to backtrack a little bit to explain.
Okay.
Are you familiar with the concept of convexity?
No, I am not.
Okay, so a convex function is a class of functions that has this upward bending property.
Mm-hmm.
And in particular, because it's upward bending, then when we talk about its curvature, we know that its curvature is not just like, so the amount that it's bending is sort of its curvature, and the fact that it's bending upwards is its convexity. As it happens, because this function is like getting your returns from the convexity, then the more, the greater your returns are. So essentially, your returns is linear in how much curvature you have. So the higher we ramp up the polynomial, the more curvature it has, and that's the thing that's generating the returns.
Okay, but that only applies to the first buy.
Yeah,
it only applies to the first buy because we're doing a convexity trick in order to get those returns. So convexity has this property that it's that a curve that bends upward, a line would fall below it, and so this means that if I take the line, which is the tangent to the curve, and I sort of anchor it on 0 and draw it over the curve, it always comes above it. And that's what's actually generating the returns. It's the ratio that comes from where the line hits versus
I can talk you through this one. I can talk you through
the next one. Try. I also have some other diagrams explaining it more visually because and I guess Griff has them. But in order to address this, because it's tricky, I tried to make the proof as geometric as possible.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm more of a number guy. Yeah, just for fun, I computed what's the, like, you can actually throw the numbers and see what's the supply at P0, which is a strange quantity to think about, but there it is. Like, does this result make sense to you?
I mean, it's kind of irrelevant. It's not the most important thing. It's just a random spot on the curve.
Okay. Okay, so moving on. Question number 2.
Well, I want to try to answer it. Sorry, I had to grab my coffee. I need coffee. What was can you show the question again?
Yeah, you can compute the supply and reserve at P0 and you get these quantities if they make sense to you, or it's just a pointless result.
They're not pointless, so it works kind of backwards because everything is derived from the invariant, and the invariant is defined itself by S naught R naught. What you're basically saying is that put it this way: when you pick a curve and you pick the initial value, which is defined by S naught and R naught, you are essentially uniquely defining the relationship between supply, reserve, and price. So it really doesn't matter which one you set. You can figure out what the other ones are. But to Griff's point, it's not a particularly important point. It's just that the concepts are now like formally conceptually related. So if you pick any one of them, you can get the other two.
Okay, I see. Okay, so the second question I had, at the end, for us to do the implementation, what we need to know is what's the price that we are going to execute a mint, and what's the price that we're going to execute a withdrawal. So I didn't understand completely why are you taking the limit of delta R tends to 0?
Oh, you're muted.
All right. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so we got to backtrack a little bit. I'm taking the limit to prove that the thing I'm calling the price is conceptually valid as a price because you never get that price. The actual way that you would implement this is not to compute a price at all. If you compute a price, you're doing a bunch of extra convolutional layers. You'd be directly computing delta S from this. See where it says delta S equals mint of delta R given R comma S equals this function? Yeah. That's the function to implement. It has an implied price, which is delta R over delta S. And then I'm proving that that implied price is consistent with the curve. So in other words, integral thing, it's everything as is as if you had taken that integral, but you're not doing any of that work. You're just using that delta S as the output.
Okay, so the price should be equal to this or a different implementation?
I haven't worked through that, but it should be pretty close. So the price is equal to my P bar thing here is the price. So where I say realized price, if you give me delta R and I give you delta S, then delta R over delta S is the price collection. Regardless of, now you could pre-compute that, and I would recommend implementing a function that people could call. Presumably they would run it not on chain though, they would run it, the way that I would implement this is if you actually take the action, you would only compute this mint method. You could expose the method that allowed them to compute the price that they would get, but I wouldn't expect people to use it except if they wanted to write a contingency inside of their transaction. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
But they will, if it's basically saying like I want to deposit 10 XDAI, and I would say deposit 10 XDAI, but I could write an if condition that said if the price that I realized for that was within some bounds, then you would actually do it, so that you could avoid front run, right? So you can, by having the realized price method, you can let people help protect themselves, and in the future expose functionality to help people protect themselves. But you still wouldn't use this derivative. You would actually still just take the ratio delta R over delta S.
Okay. Let's see if this thing works. Never use it. Yeah. Okay. So this is my fancy graph for the price. Do you see this nice?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have
very fancy
price and reserve. So let's say that now we are here, and this guy deposits a bunch of whatever, and like the end price will be at this point. So this thing is delta R. So conceptually, what price will this person have to pay?
It's the price from the path integral along the curve. It's neither. It's the price of the path integral along the curve.
Okay.
So if it were a line, then it would be the average. But because it bends, it's important that it's not just the average. It's literally the path integral. It's just that, think about when you learn physics and you do the version where you don't have to do the calculus.
Yeah. So what you're describing is
that we don't have to implement it like calculus, so that we just have algebra.
Then it's just so what you're saying is that this price should be equal to this amount. I mean, this one is not, I just did the integral over price of R from R0 to R0 plus delta R average over the interval.
Assuming that, I don't have I'm not going to try to parse that through, but assuming that that is the right representation of that path integral, then because I mean, like I did my derivations by hand a few times before I got them right, so I never really assume that like the math is right until I do it all the way through a few times. So I'm not saying that it's not right. I'm not going to jump to saying that that is the right equation for that path integral.
Let's ignore the right. I'm just saying conceptually to this expression it should be the same. So like don't look at this part. Just look at this idea.
Okay.
So what you're saying is that this amount should be equal to this amount.
That's upside down. It's reserve. It's the inverse of that.
Okay.
It's one over that.
You mean that
because price
this is a typo? Or?
No, because price is defined in DAI per token. So they're both expressed in that direction.
Oh, I see.
The price is a variable in this system model that is defined as units of the reserve currency per unit of the supply currency. So regardless of which expression you're looking at, it shows up as delta R over delta S.
Okay.
But the price goes down in one case and it goes up in the other because it's related by an inverse. What's sort of tricky about this and the reason why it's defined in terms of the invariant, why that works much better, is because you actually have to think of it as being occurring in a two-dimensional space, reserve in one dimension and supply in the other, and then restricting it to a line according to this function v. And what that allows you to do is switch between which one you think of as being the independent variable. So if you try to say the reserve is an independent, helpful for some calculations, but it's actually really unhelpful for others. So we're actually we're thinking in the phase space.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't mean that to be too much, but like whenever we see P, regardless of operation, I'm discussing something that has units DAI per token.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay,
so that answers to all my questions so far.
Cool.
Okay.
Awesome.
Hey, Abby, can I talk to Dapline for like 5 minutes just to explain the P9 versus P1?
Sure. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hop off. Z, thank you for hopping on too. I really appreciate it.
No worries. I mean, let me know if you guys need anything else. I know there's a lot of implementations. So if there's any questions specific to that, I can try to hop on again.
Today is Math Day, so we might be able to.
I'm working on my talk, the academic talk for Sherman's group at the Vienna University, so I'm doing math stuff anyway.
Okay. Okay. Well, see you guys. I'm going to stay in this room.
Thanks for jumping in, man. Good luck in the talk.
Okay.
Griff, just let me know if you want to talk about parameters after.
Oh, I do. Give me
Okay.
5 minutes just to like dig into Dapline's brain. Okay. You want to mute Dapline?
Yeah.
minting or burning price afterwards. That's how I computed the original price. But what he said is for the first sale, we are not doing that in order to mess up with the economics. And to give free money to someone.
Basically the curve is the variable.
So that you have this disparity because the P0 is not, you just make it up in order to allow for money creation.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you make it, you say this is the variable we're solving for, or that we're setting static, and then we'll see what the curve ends up.
The funny thing is, if Ethereum works on the free market, so if there was a massive sell-off, like if everyone sold every Ethereum ever created,
they wouldn't be able to.
But let's imagine they could. We don't know how the sell is going to happen. We don't know what the price is going to be as a function of time. But if we knew, then we could compute the true market cap, which will be the integral of this trajectory.
Well, that's not what market cap means. That's like the true liquidity.
I know. But if we knew that, we could compute the true market cap.
Yeah.
Which will be the integral of price over time to the supply that there's now available.
Yeah.
In this case, we know the price function.
Yeah.
So we can do this integral, and we can compute the real market cap. And what I'm saying is that the real market cap does not match the true market cap.
Well, what I would say is that the market cap is a poorly understood word, but the real market cap is the market cap that we're talking about. It's just supply times price. That's how stocks do it. You know, it's the idea sounds great. You know, this is how much money is behind a currency, but that's not what it is. You know, that's like the illusion.
I know.
And so, you know, is Google stock worth like $50 billion or whatever? No. If Amazon stock, like does that guy really have what's his name? The guy who owns Amazon? Bezos. Does he really have billions of dollars? No. Because if he tried to liquidate all of that, he wouldn't have it, right? Just like if everyone tried to sell all their houses all at once, they also wouldn't have the value of their house. So like this weird value, and we have a special case here where there is actual value backing the system, but it has nothing to do with market cap. But that's what's crazy is that you can, and this is the same thing when Swarm City sells their token, creates a token and sells, or let's not use Swarm City, those poor guys. Let's use shitcoin. When shitcoin ICO says, hey, I want to raise $1 million, I'll give you 20% of my tokens, and they keep 80% of the tokens, right? So the people who send $1 million in, they get $1 million worth of tokens, but then the people who have 80% of the tokens, they have those tokens too, and they have the same price. And so they just now this guy has $5 million. Shitcoin ICO is $5 million. And the people who gave him $1 million have $1 million. So they just created value out of nothing. And it's the same thing here, even though we actually have liquidity. So this P0 is just a weird number, you know?
Like, well, with the difference that these will not act. Like the price will not be affected by the free market. Not 100%. Yeah,
not 100%. There's a heavy-handed market maker here.
Yeah.
Very heavy-handed. Algorithmically
sort of communist. Like fixating the price.
Yeah. It's a highly regulated market. It is, but it still responds to free market forces.
It's like a market on a rail.
Yeah.
You can move forward and back as you want, but you have to be on the rail.
Yeah. And you can have secondary markets, but they will always be arbitrage to the curve. So you have some expectation of that curve. And actually, I've been doing some reading on economies, and one of the books I read, he was looking at central bank intervention in the economy, and his recommendation was that creating and destroying money is not actually an effective way to control the economy. He was saying we should have an index, like a bonding curve, controlled by the central bank, where they can directly stimulate the economy by saying, this is the price of the index, and we will always buy at this price. So it kind of gives sort of like a benchmark for the economy, and that's a better way to stimulate economic growth, which is exactly what we're doing.
Do you mind if I go hack for a while and then we continue?
Yeah. Okay, cool. I need to set the stuff with Abby. But does that make more sense? I mean, does that answer the question you were trying to ask?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. It would be nice to have this graph for Bitcoin.
For Bitcoin?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
It will be something. Oh, they have the button. It will be something like this.
For Bitcoin?
And the funny thing is you have multiple points on the same, because for the same supply, there has been different prices through history.
When you say supply?
Like, so.
Because the supply is constant. The supply is this.
For reserve.
Instead of the price being set. Yeah, exactly, for reserve. Instead of the price being set, the supply is set. Like there's a supply curve set.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, but that actually is pretty funny. Okay, let's see what Abby's up to.
Maybe we can help testing it out.
We can help testing it out? Is that what you heard? I was listening to a video. Well, the video that I just made kicked in.
is it we're not going to go over with Abby?
Whenever she gets back.
Are we
talking parameters for the hackathon, and I'm excited to like put them in a spreadsheet. I'll just use the token bonnet curve spreadsheet.
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah. What's up?
Oh good. Okay, so let's talk things. I think we should be able to kick it out pretty quickly.
Yeah, 100%. I think so too.
Biggest thing is figuring out. Jeff's on the call too, right? Yeah. The biggest thing is to find out like what the parameters are and what we need to solve for, basically.
Yep. And I'm gonna write this down so then we can also just send this out in a notes doc to everybody. So, okay. So, yeah. So what are the parameters? So and I'm looking at the graphs that the HackMD. If you have I'm just gonna put the link in here so you can just access it. So we have graphs that inform this, right? Because we have the return rate, and then we also have the graphs based off of the initial reserve, which is in millions of XI and initial supply.
Wait. Which one are you? Where'd you send that? Oh,
in the Jitsi chat.
I hope that we can use the same one that that Dapline is using, because I just copy and pasted, and then he's been building off of that one. But I lost the. There it is. I lost the Jitsi. Let's see. Is this?
I was saying that maybe you find that hack one that he's been working on, so then we can use that as the one to grow off of, because I really liked the stuff that he was writing in there too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and we just copy and pasted all of this. Wait, reference implementation roadmap. Maybe not. Is this different? Oh no, it's the same. It's just missing some of the pictures at the beginning. Okay, this is this one, and I'll paste it in the Jitsi as well. Playing two screens. Okay. And I'm excited to see phases. Ooh,
Okay, nice. I like this.
this is nice. I like this roadmap on your HackMD. This is very nice. Oh, I guess we did this.
We did this together. Yeah, this is gonna.
Yeah, right.
I'm working on translating this to the Git book though, and that's another thing that I've been putting time into, and I did last week. So this is like a really great document that I've been using for a lot of things. Yeah, we did this while talking all together, me, you, and Z.
Yeah. Okay. No wonder I like it so much. Really
so what I'm looking at is the graphs at the bottom of the page, which are the plots that do the initial raise against the funding pool fraction, and then in turn the return rate and the gradients of those.
Yeah.
So I think that we should choose, it seems like, and I'm going to just write this, I guess, at the end of this HackMD of what we want our curve parameters to be, is it's really just choosing the theta, the initial price point, and the initial raise with the function. And that's kind of like the shape curve, right? Which is, from what Z was saying, is Bex to do factor 6, right?
Yeah, I think factor 6 is better, because then the big thing is that theta, right?
Yeah.
So like keeping theta at like 0.35 or higher would be really nice. Like, people need to be sending some donation money to the DAO. You know, it looks more attractive that way. And honestly, like, yeah, I mean, I kind of like the 3.9, like the 0.35 and the 6. But I'm open.
Okay.
a suggestion.
Can you give me edit access on this on Dapline's document? Am I allowed to edit this, or will that cause too much trouble?
No, you should be able to edit it. It's not unlocked. I thought it was open.
No, it's.
You just have to sign in. You have to sign in with GitHub or something.
But I am signed in. That's super weird. Okay, I'm just gonna take notes and then I'll sign in after.
No, really? It's not letting you sign in? Like
No, for some reason it's I know I'm signed in. It's like not giving me
well, let me see. I'll play again because I mean it says has to be signed in, publish. Because it would be great if you could just get in there. I mean, I don't know how.
Yeah. No. Here, I can edit. I can't edit directly in the I just have to edit directly in the markdown.
Yes. Exactly.
Gotcha. Sometimes it lets me do it directly in the other page. So that's really interesting. Okay, so I'll just edit right here. So I'm gonna put this under where the fuck is my I'm just gonna put this directly under I need to get out of the fucking sun. Directly under the system timeline and before the hatch sale equations. And this will be the curve parameters. So repeat what you were just saying and what you were proposing. So we need the initial raise, the initial price point, and funding pool allocation, which is theta.
Yeah.
And I'll clean up these notes after. And so you were proposing based off of so we were saying S exponent 6 because that's just what Z's calculations did, and I agree with that. I think that makes a good curve, but we could like let people choose. But I think that for our parameters, why not? I don't see a big difference between doing S4 and S6.
Yeah, I mean the big difference is that if you do S4, then you have to put less money into the DAO. So then the DAO has less like bargaining power, like less people would care about like applying for a grant to this DAO because they only have $1 million or whatever.
Yeah, like narrative wise, it's saying what is the most realistic raise, one that doesn't take so much money up front that the creation of this wouldn't even be possible based off of the financial means of like the people or the initial hatchers, right? Yeah. But enough money into the DAO that it would incentivize and show and prove that there is something to be governed, there is something to be worked within, right? That would actually fund enough labor. And so like, what is that balance and how do we justify whatever numbers we choose with that balance? And I think that,
Yeah, so I definitely like 6 and I kind of like 0.35 for theta, which gives us, I like the initial price point as a penny, just because it's like, penny for a token,
Yeah, well, so that's interesting. So that is my big question: is how do we determine the price point? Is that, you know what I mean? Like how does one determine that in a way that's, you know what I mean? Like, is that arbitrary or are we just choosing it arbitrarily?
Yeah, this is a parameter that we get to define, right?
Nice. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think 0.01 makes sense. I was just wondering if there's any other like analytical thinking that needs to go into the price point, but I feel like it's not, as long as it is an arbitrary variable. So the initial raise would mean that if we're choosing 0.3%, what's 0.35 of 3 million?
Yeah, so the initial raise, yeah, exactly. So assuming, I don't know, well, this is the thing. Do you like 0.35 as a theta? 0.35 gives us an initial point of 3.9, so 0.39 cents, right? Would now be P1. And if we do 0.4, then P1 is 3.6.
Yeah, interesting.
If we do 0.5, then P1 is 3, and that's not necessarily so bad. Because if we are talking the common stack, then the reference implementation would still give a payout of 50% according to market cap.
Yeah.
Or I guess, 50%. Like it looks like 200%, but it ends up being, if they put in money to the common stack and then they put in money to the reference implementation.
Yeah, then it's really just like a 2x return or whatever.
Yeah, they would end up, if for every $2 they put in, they would be able to get $1 of market cap value.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just looking at the funding pool funds graphs and seeing if that's informing any of this decision. I mean, what you said makes sense. You know what I mean? I guess 3.5 with 3 mil would be.
It'd be
So it's
about
interesting. Yeah, no, I'm just looking at the funding pools at launch, millions of XDAI, and kind of just translating to what the return rate is at a 3 mil raise at 0.35, and that's like a 1.2 or something. Oh, funding pool funds. I'm trying to think of what that. Sorry, I can just share my screen really quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be way easier than me pointing at my screen. Just share my entire screen. I'm looking at this one right here. You see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just looking at if this is a funding pool fraction 0.35 and we're raising 3 mil, then we're kind of in this kind of 1.2 to 1.6 range. I'm wondering, is this the return factor?
This is how much, this is not the return, this is how much money is in the DAO.
Oh, okay, in XDAI. Gotcha. Yeah, so that would be 1.2. That makes sense to me. I mean, I know this, I feel like uncomfortable making like an arbitrary choice, but I mean, like that seems like a reasonable amount of money to raise 3 million. But we could also like say it's a range, but I think that for us, just setting that as a parameter is fine, right?
Yeah.
I don't.
What's interesting here is that I mean, if we're talking reference implementation, 3 million is like kind of what we're assuming.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you know that it fits all of our, it checks all of it. If we have to pull parameters out of our ass, we might as well pull the parameters that we are probably
looking for.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, like, is that the realistic? Is $1 million in the DAO be like that's a relative? That's like a good starting point. You know what I mean for a reference implementation. Like, yeah. I feel like the ideal amount will be like a 2 to 3 million kind of fund that could be distributed. But I think three and 1 works really well. And I'm fine with setting that as the parameters. One thing that I might suggest for our team is depending on how our scope goes, to make sure that we're not creeping out of it, is kind of visualizing these graphs and showing how, you know what I mean? And this is something that we wanted to do in Denver. This is a change in parameters, and this is how it's affecting how much money is going into the pool, and making that like a dynamic interface that we can just show. And we can do that, which is basically just taking these plots and turning it into a dynamic React element and just showing it. And so I think that that would be really cool. And I know that our track would really like that. So I'll work with Will to figure out how because we already have the information to build that. And that could be something that he could dig into. So.
Yeah. Are you talking about what would you make the variable, like the total amount that you'd raise?
Yeah, it would be like if you're changing the fundraising amount, right? And this is kind of what our interface was leaning into at Denver. This is the fundraising amount. This is the amount we want in the funding. If I'm choosing this variable, this means this is how much money is going to be distributed. And then doing it in a way that makes sense narrative-wise, that when we're pitching this can walk through, say, we chose these parameters, but look, this is how you use the system within your own, within your own organization, right? And so that could be really easy to spin up. And I kind of want to add that to the spec. So cool. So our parameters, are 3 million XDAI, initial price point 0.01, funding pool allocation theta equals 0.35.
Yep. And then this makes, well, I guess I'll put it down here because this ends up making, oops, so sorry, making P1 equals 3.9. Oh, sorry. 0.039 XDAI.
Right, that's correct. Did I do math correctly? Let me check.
Yeah, it's something close. I don't know. It's 3 million times 0.35.
Yeah.
I think it should be right.
Yeah, that's good. And then we should calculate within the sim potentially just down the line what the actual return rate is, like the decimal, but it's somewhere between, if we're looking just strictly at the graph of like a, what, 3.9 with the S6 kappa, just to have that down. Do you see what
well, and that's where P1 comes in.
Yeah, totally. I just mean that we should write it so people can see the return rate, because I think that narrative wise, when you say this is the return rate instead of this is P1 and P0, you know. But,
yeah, I mean, it's so hard to say. Those words are a little sketch to me, return rate, because their tokens are locked. So it's really just like, this is the price people will be able to buy the tokens, and your return rate will probably be higher, honestly. But it could also, at least for the first people, the first tokens that you unlock, you know.
It's just interesting because it's like, again, like after talking to the workshop, the leaders, like these guys are like looking at this, like want institutional investors to be able to address this as a real thing. You know what I mean? So maybe there's some wording change that I can do narrative wise, instead of return rate. Like this is the end price point, right? But it's almost like the guarantee of investment. This is almost like your risk of your investment. And so translating, instead of the return rate, instead translating that to something that has to do with risk factor, or just translating that to some investor terms, is where my head is at. So
yeah, no, I mean, in the end it is, I mean, it's just so hard. The market cap illusion, you know, it's my favorite phrase this week. It's
the market cap illusion.
Yeah, because it's like, if everyone sold their house right now, it wouldn't be worth what they're worth, you know?
Yeah, yep, totally.
So, and it's the same with stocks and the same with tokens. But anyway, okay, let's see what other numbers we got to pull out of our ass. So
I think that's,
well, that's for the token bonding curve. That's a lot of them. But then there's the friction, which I think will we just stay at 2%?
Was that was 2% calculated before?
That's something we just get to pick.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not, I mean, the dream, honestly, in my opinion, eventually it becomes not a fixed rate, but something that's variable based off of the amount of money that the DAO has.
And I think that 100%. That's like how I envision it too. That it becomes something that can be dynamically shifting within how much money is in the pool at any time, how many people are buying in, and it becomes something that really is just like a way to, you know, keep that equilibrium going. So that's how, and I think that narrative wise we can say that, but let's just choose 2% works. 2 to 5%. I think 5% was also be nice, but I think it's like, what is too high for someone to react emotionally to, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is the secondary market effects.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like, because hey, fuck it, 20%, you know?
Yeah.
But in the end, then no one would ever use the curve, and all the trading would happen on the market itself, right?
Yeah,
so
totally.
The higher that number is, the more secondary market volatility is allowed. That doesn't actually help the commons. The smaller the number is, then volatility really has a huge impact on the commons. So that's the trade-off. I like 2%. Because that's what we've been saying.
I think 2% is like a good number too. So let's just do that.
Let's see, what other numbers do we have? We have, oh well, so scenarios. How much do we want people to be buying in? Like, I assume you're going to have an example of like, okay, somebody buys in with X number of XDAI, you know.
And like, how much what that looks like, and what price they get it at, and what they get in return, and stuff like that. Exactly. So are you saying like what the average buy-in should be or something?
What are you going to use for examples when you actually explain? You know,
I think the explanation will come within the hatchers and kind of defining the narrative within the hatchers, right? Of like, what are actually realistic, what are the realistic contributions of a hatcher in that user story, right? And like, what should be a minimum contribution? So if you looked at the band demo, did you see the band protocol demo?
No.
They set minimum contribution levels. So that's like a constraint that maybe I think would be valuable to add during the hatching phase. Like once it opens, anybody, and there isn't a minimum, and maybe you can set a minimum if you want, but I think that introducing a minimum to what the initial contribution is for the hatchers actually aligns really well with like what the user story and who the people who are the hatchers, which are people with expertise, people like, you know, the expertise, the people who have what is it called, who have the intrinsic motivation to buy into it. So I think that that's how I will show that, and we can set that number right now as a parameter. Like during the hatching phase, this is the number, and I feel like it's something like between 50 and 100 xi, if I'm kind of thinking of like what hatchers want to be or something, or I don't know. That's like kind of a question for like thinking about in the reference implementation, like who do you think are going to be hatching the curve with the token engineering commons, for example?
Because of the KYC requirements and blah, 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 I think our minimum is going to be like around either 5K or 10K. We could just say 5K.
Okay. Okay,
but
sure.
Just for coordination costs and whether or not it's worth like onboarding another human into the governance system at the beginning, you know?
Yeah, totally. Again, it's that's right.
Say that again? Broke up.
Out. Oh no, can you hear me?
Now I can.
Okay, cool. Okay, 5 to 10K also makes a lot of sense. I guess it's like a number that people can decide upon, and we can say that you can constrain to like what you think the minimum should be in the narrative, and then we'll set it as like a. We'll just do examples within the 5 to 10K range, because we're considering this being like people who are already doing labor within the commons but don't have all of the money to just sustain the creation of a new commons, and it's really just kind of implementing within their situation. So let's say that it's a range limited to initial contribution being
let's
like
pick one number. Pick one number for sure.
Okay, 5K. I mean, I think that
done.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, in the end, we'll try to work with ranges as much as we can, you know, or like basically, if we pick a scenario, you know, and we have some variability, like our scenario will work for a range, and that range might hopefully will not be so narrow, but it will only be around like so much. But there's a lot more initial, like these are curve parameters. There's a lot more parameters, and I really do think that we should at least align on people buying in after the curve. I mean, I for me, like this, I assume it will make a lot of sense to show what happens in the open system, right?
Yeah, totally. And what that looks like as I mean, it's like, how do you show an example of that though? You know what I mean? Of like how, by projecting how much, I have to go downstairs, projecting how much, how many people we will need to buy into the system when the system opens up to keep it sustainable, or, you know what I mean? Like what do you think is the data that we need to show or do an example of?
Yes, actually the sustainability thing, that's derived from the friction fee. Like the total number of basically selling that needs to happen, buying and selling that needs to happen to keep this sustainable, but also so volume, total volume, I guess. But then more about just like, okay, someone buys in for, you know, $50,000, and then the price goes up to this. This is the new price, and then another person sells $25,000. And now the price goes down to this, you know, and like now we can see what happens with these prices. And if we want to make a complete scenario, we definitely need to have some action in the open market.
Okay, cool. So that's something that I will focus on trying to just at least like simulate in some capacity of just like this is how the price fluctuates, and just like show that when people are buying in, this is how the price is changing. This is how the volume is changing. This is also the other thing that needs to be that I just thought of. Sorry, I'm locked out of my apartment right now. The other thing that I just thought of, no, there's people in there, they just can't hear me. The other thing that I thought of is also remember that the tokens are vested in accordance to how much money is funded through the pool. So also being able to show how the vesting period, because that contributes to the overall functioning of the system as well. So that's another thing that has to be simulated and can be done together in like kind of just an overall simulation, right? Like this is how many people, the funding is allocated to these. This means their token unlocks they burn this, that affects the system, that gets more people to buy in, and just like kind of showing that all encompassing thing. So yeah, I'm already trying to visualize it. But that's, go ahead.
What would you think the full vesting requirement should be?
What do you mean the full vesting requirement?
So like the DAO, the vesting is based off of how much money the DAO spends. So and there's this factor called, I think we call it beta, but that doesn't seem right because we have another use for beta. You know, if the DAO needs to spend much more than it starts with for all the tokens to be vested. So like I would say 3 million, you know.
So 3 million being the amount of money that the DAO has to allocate up front before the tokens start vesting, is what you're saying?
No, before the tokens are totally vested. Every time the DAO makes any expenditure, some tokens get vested.
But that's interesting. So it has to be a factor of the initial funding pool allocation is kind of how we're saying it. Or it has to be completely saying that the DAO has to allocate the amount of money that we initially raised for all the tokens to be vested.
Yeah, I think
which is interesting.
Right. I think you're absolutely right. It should be a factor of the initial raise.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if that's like the full, you know, it's again returning all of it, or if it's just again like a kind of, you know, I'm trying to think of math wise what would actually make sense.
So yeah, if the DAO has $1 million, and then it spends it all, then a third of the tokens would be unlocked.
Yeah.
Right. And but then the rest of the tokens are still stuck, and the DAO is not making any money, and so the people have their tokens stuck. They have the money backing their tokens still in there too.
Yeah.
So it's kind of this weird, it's this funny thing. But what's funny is if there's no speculation and there's nothing, they basically do this whole donation thing. I'm curious how important this vesting factor is for making sure that we don't have some kind of loss of funds, like that we can't create a scenario that breaks the system. So maybe because like if they get a third of the money back, or if they get to sell a third of their tokens, and then what is the price that they're selling at, right? Will that empty the DAO? Like I think we can actually break the system based off of this vesting factor.
And I see exactly what you're saying. So the ideal vesting factor is one that, because then it's like incentivizing people to fund more. Then it's also like how much money, how much projects are being suggested, you know what I mean, and proposed, because that's also exactly where the funding is going towards. So there needs to be also a rate of projects and proposals, and that the amount of money needed for labor needs to be more than the amount of money. I mean, needs to be more than the amount of money in the DAO to keep the money circulating. You see what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you definitely need people to be asking for the money, right? Otherwise, it can't go anywhere.
Yeah. So that means that
sorry,
I'm just thinking it through. Okay. I need to like whiteboard this out or just kind of draw it out or something, because
exactly. I mean, the thing is, if we don't have the actual price curve, like if I knew what the price was as it was going down, to like, you know, where, you know, people are selling their tokens, then it'd be a lot easier to make sure that we have a good vesting factor. I mean, I guess technically if they sell out all of their tokens, I mean, I think if we just pick it really high, it won't break anything for sure. 4 or 5, then we won't break anything. And basically what it says is that there has to be a lot of volatility. There has to be like what the vesting factor really incentivizes is for the hatchers to create a solid market. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the more volume that they have coming in and out of the bonding curve, the more likely they are to get fully vested, because that puts money in.
That's the incentivization of it, totally. But then it has to also be, I'm wondering how the vesting factor then turns into like returns, and how, because the vesting factor is also in accordance to how they're either going to be then keep holding tokens to use within the system, or how much they're going to be returning. And that's kind of like, you know, figuring out how to say, because they're going to burn them for just withdrawal, right? You know what I mean? It's not like they're going to hold all their tokens in there.
Oh, yeah.
But it's also not going to be like that they're burning all of them. And then when they're getting unlocked tokens, they might not be burning the full amount. And so how can we preemptively kind of figure out how much we can incentivize them to hold and burn, or, you know what I mean? And how that applies to the rest of the system.
Yeah. No, it's the speculators and the change makers, that's what we call them in Give It, the people that are receiving the tokens and doing good work, right? And then it's also like, maybe if you end up getting a lot of people to use your token for even currency, you know,
yeah,
like say, hey, I'm a rainforest token maximalist and I only work for rainforest token. You know, that's going to help.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to help these hatchers a lot. And
yeah. Okay,
yeah.
so let's set it arbitrarily high, but I think that this is something to discuss in more detail. But we need to like whiteboard it out and say these are all of the different factors, and this is where they're all coming into play. But I want to be conscious of both of ours time, right? Because we could think on it forever right now, you know. And I feel like that's like it's a deeper conversation. So let's set it. Go ahead.
I feel like 3. It's like kind of easy to justify. It's like, okay, you put 3 million in,
yeah,
you have to spend 3 million, right? Like,
yeah, and that's like that's
elegance.
And people, yes, I completely agree, and that's what I was going to suggest. It just like makes a lot of sense. So let's make it that, but let's make sure that we explore that further to make sure that that vesting factor, since it's such an important part of the system, is actually isn't really breakable, and we have a realistic way of like how initializers and hatchers are going to be able to set that. And I'll think about it more too.
Yeah.
I know Zargam mentioned this too, so when he has time, we can loop him into figuring that out.
And this is something that we didn't really talk about in the scope of Team 1, dealing with the vesting.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's like how, you know, I think that it was going to be very much so like pulling in the Team 3's interface, right? And just saying, if this is how much money is being vested, this is how your tokens unlock or something, just in accordance to a, you know, like kind of arbitrary rate, just to show and prove it. So I think that we could do it in a way, again, that's like loosely structured and not breakable, by just kind of attributing it to a flow and dynamic, literally just this is how much is being allocated. This is how much percentage of your tokens based off of how much tokens are a percentage of the overall supply, and then just show it like that. And that's how I was planning on like trying to demonstrate it.
I think that's a great idea. Like, how cool would it be if you send an email out every time that, hey, the DAO just funded this project to plant 1,000 trees, and some of your tokens are unlocked.
Yep, and it could be as simply as demonstrating it as us having in our interface a token balance that shows that when you successfully allocate money to a milestone, the number of your unlocked tokens increases, or something like something as simple as that. Which is basically how it's going to be. It's just like how much is actually unlocked is the thing that we need to discuss further in the reference implementation. So, but yeah, I have that written down as like an interface point with Team 3 that I'd want to design into. And then Team 2 is really just like, okay, well, with my unlocked tokens, how much can I use, and how will I use it within the conviction voting module? So that's my plan for that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, cool. And let's see. So vesting factor. Is there anything else to do with vesting? I don't think so.
No, I think that there was just like this is the thing of like how much is it vested when the hatchers reach their goal, and it's like when the funding, because it's like, you know, tokens are locked and the pool is accumulating, but like once you reach the point of the goal, right, and the curve opens up, is a certain amount being vested, just in general, like a percentage of it to provide some liquidity. Yeah, and 100%. So like But at the open phase.
Yeah, at the open phase, until they spend $1, they cannot sell any tokens.
No, I know. No, totally. I mean, is there, because the vesting period starts, and I'm saying, is there an initial, like, and this is what we were kind of messing around with before, is there an initial temporal unlocking, saying you reached the goal, this is how much is unlocked, or is it just unlocked and then the funds have to be allocated to initiate the vesting process? Or is there an initial unlock that gives you some liquidity and then it just enters the vesting process? We were both kind of discussing different things.
Yeah, I'm still not sure what you mean with this initial liquidity for the hatchers.
Yeah, like saying that instead of right now, the vesting period initializes when funding is allocated to a milestone, right?
Yeah.
That's like the initiation. Or is that, and this is the second thing that I'm explaining, is that what I originally thought it was from our conversations in Denver, but I wasn't really sure, is that hatchers reach the goal and they get, so hatchers raise their money, their tokens are locked, and right when they reach the amount that they need to open the curve, a certain percentage of those tokens are unlocked for a return.
Yeah, in the end, yeah, we can't do that because they get to sell their tokens. It creates this unsafe space for hatchers because, like, the people who do sell their tokens make more money than the people who don't. Mm-hmm. So it's not really fair. Like, it's like yeah, it's a bad.
That's why I was getting clarification on it. And so we're just going to say that it automatically vests. Cool.
Yeah. And then also there's no vesting for the first person who buys in the open phase. They don't.
No, they don't vest at all. They're just can completely speculate and buy and work and stuff. Okay, cool. So I feel like there aren't any other parameters to decide upon
for working in the open phase, like what kind of numbers we want people to be like, because I want to know what narrative. I know you're trying to stay in a general narrative, but here's the, like, do you want, what range of milestones should we be looking at on like spending money out of the DAO? That's some parameters that we're going to choose in Team 3, although we can do it now. And then
well, so it's Go ahead.
Then there's what kind of how much do you expect an investor, a speculator, to buy into the curve? You know. So
the latter is harder to figure out, and I have to think about what that's going to be. You know what I mean? And I don't know how to really predict that. But the first one is interesting. This goes into framing like what the milestones actually are and how much labor is going to be needed to sustain, right? And I've been realizing more and more that the labor is, and this is from conversations with like Dandelion, with Dandelion at SourceCred. So I keep getting Daplion and Dandelion confused. Is that, you know, there's like continuous labor, which is really paying someone. So if we're talking about like the open source project concept, it's kind of like paying a salary almost, right? So there's like continuous milestones. It's not just like, this is a project, major project that we want to fund, but this is the continuous labor that we want to fund by how many people are already contributing to the commons. And so I feel like that when we're talking about the open phase and what the labor that it's funding, it's creating that basically the spec for how many people are continuously producing labor for the commons. And so it's so different for different use cases, but I think that looking at it for the engineering commons and for the like open source projects use case and scoping the parameter along that, which is like, really this needs to fund the continuous development, like how much does it cost to maintain like an open source project, and have that be the amount of money that needs to be constantly allocated through the open phase. And stuff like that. But that's just hard because like that's something that like SourceCred wants to measure to inform that, you know? So I'm wondering, what is an estimation that we feel comfortable making? And how much money does that look like to be allocated within the open phase continuously over certain points of time? That was my thought. That wasn't an answer. That was just like my thought process for how I'm trying to find an answer to it. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to pick a magic number.
You just want to pick a magic number?
Yeah, I mean, I just, you know, like, I think we shouldn't drain the thing down to zero, right? And never talk about it going down to zero, because math gets really funny near the edges, you know? So maybe we talk about like the the max that we ever spend out of the DAO is $300,000, and 300,000 XDAI,
which is a third. So we're just working in thirds, really. 3
Yeah.
is the magic number.
Yeah, 3 is, yeah, it's a nice, it is a magic number.
I think 3 is safe. Let's do it.
To spend.
I like how these conversations are. Well, this is how we should define this number, and then we're gonna choose a third.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Which is good. So for anybody watching this recording, we are thinking it through.
Yeah, listen, we're developing thoughts, but in the end, we just got to say something. And I mean, at least maybe you don't use these numbers at all. Maybe you don't talk about the open phase, but at least I don't want to be blindsided by it later and not have a simulation for when the reserve pool goes up to 3 million, because some people put in $1 million extra or something, like anything that we're going to want this range to play with to make sure that it works. And same with, like, okay, so if max amount commons that they ever spend is 300,000 XDAI, well, that means 1,000 XDAI will be unlocked. The lowest the reserve pool could ever go, well, I don't know what that is yet, but like it depends on what the price is. But like 1,000, basically, what I can say is how many tokens are. I mean, there's going to be 200 million tokens. So if 100,000, so 300,000 DAI, that ends up being 10% of the tokens. 10% of the tokens will be unlocked. So that's 20,000.
You're breaking up.
20 million tokens will end up unlocked.
No.
Hey. I kind of hear you. Can you hear me, Jeff?
Full testing factor 3.
Yes. 3 times the amount that the DAO raises. Yeah, exactly.
Hello?
Welcome back.
Yeah, everything just totally broke up and everything was frozen and I was still functioning. Sorry about that.
No worries. So basically, if the max amount that the common spends is $300,000, then the number of tokens that gets unlocked is 20 million tokens. So that's the max number of tokens that will be sold below the price, below P1.
So then P1 in the hatch phase. That's what you're saying.
In the open phase, the price can go below P1.
And that's the maximum.
Only 20 million tokens. So then we don't have to worry about what happens if the price goes to P0, right? Or if it goes to lower than that. We can be like, okay, I know the price will never be below this. I know I don't really have to worry about the crazy math that happens when the price gets really close to 0 and all the tokens are sold, right? And we just we don't worry about the ramp down, piece for the simulation, right? And so it's narrowing the numbers that we have to concern ourselves with.
So to repeat that back to you, just so I'm making sure I hear it clearly, the number of tokens that can be sold underneath P1 is 20 million, and that's calculated through the amount of money that can be allocated from the funding pool at any point in time. which is in accordance to how much money can be vested, how many tokens can be vested at all, right? And so that's why we are able to have that limiting factor of how many tokens can actually be sold under the P1.
Yep, it's the max amount for the commons to spend and the vesting factor and the total number of tokens, which ends up being 200 million tokens.
Nice.
Let's see. Initial supply. And contribution.
200 million or 20 million? That's the initial funding supply.
Yeah, that's the initial total token supply.
Oh, gotcha. Yep. Okay, gotcha. And then the max amount for commons to spend. Yep.
$20 million tokens will be vested. And then, yeah. And so now, now I need to know what's the total amount of the max number of XDAI that could ever go into the bonding curve above in the open phase. So that I can know when we're doing these simulations, we will never have more than 3 million XDAI in the funding pool or something like that.
Yeah, and I think that arbitrarily it seems like 3 million because that's the initial raise, but you kind of want it to be able to go over the initial raise a little bit, don't you? So I feel like a certain factor over the initial raise would be okay, but it should be limited to make sure, because if we have too much money in the funding pool, then you just have this money that's like totally locked up in the vesting period. That's where the vesting period needs to and that's where the friction fee needs to change in accordance to that, right? So let's just set an arbitrary to solve for the friction fee not being dynamic. And maybe it's something to do with calculating the 2 in there, or just saying it's something like 5 million. It can't like go above 5 million or something.
This is so then you're talking the initial funding pool or initial reserve pool, I mean?
What were you saying? I was saying the funding pool. You were saying that there's
the funding pool
reserve pool.
Yeah, the reserve pool. So the reserve pool starts with 1.9 million, and you want to see, okay, what if it gets up to 5 million? So that much XDAI goes into it, like basically double the amount of the initial investment. Okay, I can play with that.
Try playing with that, but it's something that's arbitrary and should be really defined based off of, right? Because the amount of the reserve pool is the amount of
this is just how much more money people will buy in. So like this is really dependent on your narrative, right? It's like, how are you going to sell this to the people? Oh yeah, so the initial hatchers put in $3 million, and then speculators and other investors and impact investors that care about the cause, whichever. I mean, I really think you'll end up wanting to choose one cause or one idea.
Well, it's how the community grows, and it's in parallel. How much money are you getting into? How much labor is being done? How great is that labor in growing the commons? And then how is that slowly growing to, one, more people want to work for the commons, and two, more people want to put in money for the commons, because it's like this synchronous thing, right? So putting a limit on it is hard, but realistically, I think like
the limit is
like a valuation.
Yeah, the limit is only for us. It's not
totally.
Actually in the system. As many people could buy into the system as ever, right? But let's say that you have this initial hatch phase, and then it's been running for a little bit, and they've spent $100,000 as the DAO and have made real impact on something, and they've convinced a bunch of other people that were investing in helping the Indonesian rainforest to put in millions of dollars. In fact, the UN put in $1 million, and then the United States matched it, and then there was an individual donor, Bill Gates. Bill Gates decided to put in $1 million, so now we have $3 million extra in there. Like, I want to make sure that whatever math we end up using, it doesn't break, when there's when we hit this $3 million mark, and that your story has like we devised the right math for your story.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I guess it's like the story that I was looking to get into is more like the instead of saying the UN's putting in $1 million, everybody's putting in millions of dollars. You know what I mean? It's more so like I look at it as how like a seed scales to Series A, and a Series scales to a Series B, and to a Series C and Series D, right? And so you're always increasing. So we could technically look at it like a seed to a Series A. The hatchers are putting in the seed funding, right? Which is that kind of, right now it's like a 1 million, 3 million. That's like a large seed. Where does the Series A go from there? It goes to 15 million. So maybe we say this, 15 million usually is like 10 to 15 million. It's like,
it's gonna be hard. That's just a lot of money. It's really far from our.
No, I know. So, but this is like more so looking at it from seed to Series A, right? So like, and it's how does that scale in relative? So we can choose one number, but I feel like this is a greater conversation again, with all of these variables, right? So let's just choose, if we're starting at 3 million, then that means that we could probably at least get to 5 million or 6 million, based off of how the concept is that we want to scale that. And so I think 5 million would be very realistic, in which we were talking about starting this with like a token engineering research, right? Like say, I'm like thinking of like the investors who would get in to a token engineering commons, like you'd have Andreessen coming in and like Polychain coming in to fund that research, you know what I mean? And so that would be able to get us up to the 5 million. So that's where I feel like is a realistic thing that works.
Yeah, and this is another thing where it's like, okay, this is so important because how many tokens do they get? How does it affect conviction voting in the governance system compared to the hatchers? And it, like getting these numbers. I mean, this is where the hackathon has a lot of value for us as the common stack team, like so that we actually have some perspective on this, because we're going to be able to run these scenarios and play with this while also like trying to win this hackathon.
And so it's interesting too, because the whole investor, that's like the biggest question that I know our track had, which is how does those large sums of investment that are coming in the open phase affect the overall governance of the system? And that's where, we can, that's like a team 1 and team 2 thing, but that's actually where team 5 also fits in. The expertise weighted governance and how you can weight previous contribution in accordance to new contribution and how that affects governance. So that's something that we should potentially noodle on with team 5 at the hackathon. And all of that. So because that's super fucking important. And that's again something that needs to be demonstrated narrative wise and not technically in the system right now. Right now we can set that arbitrary number and say this works, the math works within this amount of money of how we would want a community to scale to become continuously funded and self-governed, right? And then have answers to those questions narratively with team 5. So what I think 5 million makes sense more and more. I think that's like realistic and we can work within the math.
When you say 5 million, do you mean 5 million on top of the 2 million, or do you mean 3 million on top of the 2 million?
I mean,
so like
5 million on top of the 2 million.
Okay.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm down. It's definitely on the edge of like, oh shit, we're testing it, but I think we can make it work.
Okay, well,
what's more important is that it fits your narrative, and and our math needs to fit the narrative that makes sense for team 1.
Okay.
Full stop.
Yeah, totally.
So like,
okay, but it's like it's kind of like the narrative's in flux. So like we can bring it down. So maybe we do 3 with 2 and just say 5 million and then just go with that, because that becomes enough to fund an organization. You know what I mean?
I'll just say
it's kind of
unless it's a problem.
Unless it's a problem.
and then we'll be like, yo, or because we don't have CAD here. We don't have months of like simulation work to do. And if all of a sudden we realize, this equation that we're using, if they buy in 5 million, they'll have way more voting power than the hatchers, or something crazy like that, or maybe there's like the price goes through the roof, you know, or like who knows, like just got to see what happens. And if it doesn't make sense because they bought in 5 million because our equations don't make sense, because we're not Sargum with CAD, then we'll just back off and we'll be like,
so that's what I'm saying. We go for that. And then if it's like the 7 million raise, which is like a typical kind of like, in the middle range of Series A, right? Whatever. If that doesn't work, then we back off and we go down to 5 million. And that makes so much sense. So let's try for that and just see where it goes. And then see what happens from there in complete agreement. How are you going to do that? Are you going to do that with Dapline? Is that what you guys are focusing on with Matt today, is trying to figure out if that works?
Yeah, we're gonna. I hope that we'll make the time to do a full JavaScript simulation. This is the dream. This is the dream. Now I'm gonna need to focus on Team 3 a little.
Yeah.
While I sit next to Dapline and he works on Team 1, but it's already 7 p.m. here, so we'll see how it goes. Don't get your expectations up.
No, totally. I won't, but you should connect Dapline and me. I know you guys are there, so that makes sense to do it. But at a certain point, if you need to also focus on Team 3, I can help him with that and get on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's probably on it on his own.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Better than I'm not. I'm going to be a distraction if anything. Let's see, and then do you want to talk about Team 2 parameters, or should I just talk to Spunnet about it? Because then we have the beta.
Did you say Ben or did you say then?
Spunnet. Then
okay.
Maybe, I don't know, Spunnet.
Because the Team 2's parameters are interesting, right? Because it's the trigger functions, and how are we defining the trigger functions in accordance to how much money is being allocated and how many tokens are unlocked to govern is how I think we're defining the trigger functions, right? Yep. And so it
alpha and beta, those are the big variables. So there's also the conviction.
What are those? Alpha is
the forgetting factor. It's how fast does conviction accumulate over time, you know? I think at least Zargum likes 30 days as like a kind of a 95 percentile for a storyline, right? For our storyline, in the end, you have a certain amount of token weight. And your token weight, maybe you have 1,000 tokens. Well, its max conviction could be, depending on what we choose alpha at. If alpha is 0.5, I think its max conviction ends up being 25. Sorry, for 10 token, for 1 token, it's worth 2.5 tokens at max, right?
Yeah.
And if we choose an alpha of 0.9, 1 token ends up being worth 10 tokens. So like if someone buys a lot of tokens, it takes a lot of, with a higher alpha, it takes a lot of time for them to actually affect the voting system, right? But if they then put their money where their mouth is, they make it wait. I mean, I in general am very biased towards a high alpha, a 0.9, 0.95 even alpha, that basically says it takes 30 days for you to get 1 token to be worth 9.5 tokens worth of conviction weight, right? And if you have a lower alpha, then in 5 days, you'll reach the max, right?
No, I think it's a larger alpha in accordance to conviction over like a temporal, like 30 days. That makes a lot of sense. But then there's this interesting factor that comes into play. That's like, if it gets much amount of tokens in this short amount of time, then that beta, which is the amount, needs to not rely on the alpha to get the trigger to happen.
Yeah.
So it needs to be something, the alpha and the beta, I see what you're saying, they need to be linked in a certain capacity, right? And so can't we define the alpha and the beta based off of, as variables that are based off of the amount of money in relation to how much money is in the funding pool? Do you see what I'm saying? So if a milestone is needing 50K, that's X percentage of the funding pool, which means that correlates to, it needs this alpha and this beta. Can the alpha and the beta?
Wait, what do you consider beta?
Sorry, maybe I was not considering beta correctly. Beta is the amount of tokens. Alpha is the
sorry, the amount of yeah. I'm sorry. I guess I thought you were deeper in the conviction voting stuff.
No, I wasn't.
But you're all token voting curve. So okay, I will just give you a quick rundown and.
Well, how about is that valuable right now? Or how about you and Spunnet talk about it, and then we touch base after, and I'll just look more into the conviction voting stuff, because it seems like it will just be an explanation. I can do it on my own, and then you guys can talk about the parameters.
Okay,
let's just do that.
That sounds good. We'll do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay. I do have one thing to run by you.
Okay. Go ahead.
Is the Team 3 math.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is no, you know what? Actually, that is also, it's more related to token buying curve stuff. So that, never mind. That would be the completeness. I will let you go.
Okay. Well, so I'm gonna go eat something. But then you talked with Spunette, but then I want to get the download on the parameters from Team 2 and Team 3. So when you figure that out, let me know, and then you can just either voice message me or we can just hop on and you can just tell me it, so I can have an all-encompassing view of what the parameters are for the other teams, because that informs our thing. So do that, and then either voice message me or ping me, and we'll hop on a call again.
Yeah, I'll put the curve parameters for sure in this HackMD.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and then I think that, yeah, and then how do we want to communicate those curves to the parameters to the rest of the team? Should we just send it out, or do we just say that this is to each team, these are the parameters that you're working with, or just refer to this document?
Yeah, refer to the document and paste the details in the math section.
Cool. Okay, that makes sense. Great.
Okay.
So go do that and then ping me.
Okay, see ya.
All right, cool. Bye.
Okay, I end live stream. Jeez, that was hard. How was it, Jeff?
My brain is catching up.